Hello, everybody. Welcome to a long overdue addition to my Why I Love This Artist series. Now, I've picked up a lot of subscribers since my last video, which I guess was the Monkeys, I think, maybe, okay, a year ago. Uh, so I'm going to attach a playlist underneath this video to show um, just the other episodes. I think this is, I don't even know what episode this is. It'll be in the title. So what this is for anybody that's new, or for those of you that are older, and I've just completely forgotten about this series because that happens. Essentially what this is I just kind of ramble a little bit about why I fell in love with a particular artist. Usually they're, within the top 10 or 20 favorite artists in my collection, and artists that I've kind of stuck with, whether they're lifelong passions or artists that I've picked up on in later years, like the Monkees or, the Head and the Heart, both of which have been episodes of this series. But I've also done, the Beatles, Tom Petty. So this is kind of a mix of an artist that I knew and listened to when I was younger, didn't really jump into it, and then I jumped into it, and I jumped into it head first. And of course, you can tell by the thumbnail that I'm talking about Sir Ivan Morrison, Van the Man, as he's known by his Christian name. Van Morrison is a favorite of mine. When I mention favorite songwriters of all time, Van Morrison is up there. He's up there with Bob Dylan. He's up there with Paul Simon. He's up there with Lennon McCartney, John Prine. Van Morrison is on that Mount Rushmore for me. I think he's absolutely brilliant. I think his politics are insane, but I think Van is one of those guys that started in the '60s, still can hold up vocally, to a close level of what he's been doing for the last 40 years or so. You have artists out there like, I don't like to nitpick, but artists like, your Paul McCartney's, your Bob Dylan's, guys that the voice is not where it was, obviously. And again, I love Bob Dylan. Y'all know that. I talk about Bob Dylan ad nauseum. I'm sure my friends are rolling their eyes because I've mentioned Bob Dylan in a Van Morrison video. But, yeah, I mean, you get these big rockers, even like the guys from the 70s and 80s that are coming, up on, 40 or 50 years in the business. Def Leppard and, Aerosmith. Those guys, their voices are not even really close to what they were. I'm saying all that, you know what I'm talking about. I have nothing wrong with Joe Elliott. I have nothing wrong with Steven Tyler. I think their voices actually sound pretty good, if I'm going to be honest still. But anyway, Van Morrison's voice still holds up, and it still is hard to decipher. Van Morrison's voice from 2024 to Van Morrison's voice 1984. So that is one of those things that I love, is that his voice holds true to where it's been for years and years and years. So anyway, let me back it up a little bit. I first got into Van Morrison in probably my early middle school years. My mom was a huge Van Morrison fan. She had his greatest hits collection. She had this album, Moondance, probably his biggest album, and had the hits Into the Mystic. Moondance is on here, Crazy Love. But as a kid, I don't remember the deep cuts at all. Like, I don't even remember And It Stoned Me, which is a staple in Van Morrison's catalog, one of his best songs. I don't really remember Into the Mystic. I remember Moondance. I remember Brown Eyed Girl from Blowing Your Mind, his first record. But I never give this the time of day, And my mom had this CD. I remember she had the case for the CD for a long time. I think she loaned the CD itself to my uncle, and he never gave the CD back. But this, I remember sitting in my parents' CD collection. It was my mom's, and I remember it playing. Again, I don't remember latching onto it. I remember listening to that greatest hits collection, and I remember hearing, Here Comes the Night on there. I remember hearing Gloria by Them, who was that was Van Morrison's garage group before he kind of broke off and did, Blowing Your Mind, Astro Weeks, Moondance. So yeah, you have, Here Comes the Night, Gloria, two big hits that, Van still sings. And I knew that stuff. I knew Jackie Wilson said, "I'm in heaven when you smile." I did not know that it was on an album called St. Dominic's Preview, which is a great, great album. So I knew the hits. Like a lot of kids, when you're listening to the music of your parents, you're, going to the hits first. You're going to, that Beatles compilation. You're going to that Beach Boys compilation. For me, it was this Van Morrison compilation that my mom had in the kitchen, and we played it a lot. And I even remember as a kid thinking that Van Morrison sounded like Mick Jagger for whatever reason. An album that I don't have that my mom also had was the Long Black Veil album that the Chieftains put out. The Chieftains, an Irish traditional folk band that, worked with a lot of modern singers, including Mick Jagger. Sting is on that record. Sinead O'Connor is on that record. Mark Knopfler is on that record. But Van Morrison is on that record doing what is it? Have I Told You Lately? I think the song that he wrote. But he also did a full album with the Chieftains called Irish Heartbeat. Fantastic record. He does traditional Irish songs and he does a few originals. But yeah, so I knew Van Morrison there. So Van Morrison was not somebody that I didn't know, nothing about. I had the hits in the bag. I even knew, those collaborations that he did, with the Chieftains. So I wasn't, a collector of his stuff. I didn't have a Van Morrison greatest hits. It was my mom's. I didn't have Moondance. I just, I listened to the greatest hits, and that was fine. Well, fast forward to my senior year of college, 2016. And I remember, I'll back it up. Mom is a diehard Van Morrison fan. She loves Van Morrison. I think he was one of those artists that she followed, and up until recent times. I mean, she wasn't somebody that listened to Van when she was a kid and then just stopped because she went to other things. She was buying Van Morrison stuff in the 80s and the 90s. So she knew a lot of those deep cuts. And I knew that my mom liked Van Morrison. So a go-to gift of mine for my mom over the years, and even still, is to get her Van Morrison CDs. So what was the album? Keep It Simple was an album I gave to her. That's one of the few I don't have on CD. And I gave her this record, which I found about a year ago from my own collection, Down the Road. And I remember hearing the song, where is it? I'm getting there. The Beauty of the Days Gone By. What a track that is. If you don't know that song, listen to The Beauty of the Days Gone By. It's kind of like an Auld Lang Syne-ish kind of, Raise a Toast kind of tune. It's gorgeous. And this is from 2002. So this record's already 22 years old. But I remember getting Mom this CD a few years ago. By a few years ago, I mean like 10 or 15 years ago. And got her that. Picked up a couple other CDs over the years. And that was just always a fun thing because Van Morrison is so prolific. I mean, he's putting out records left and right. I mean, just this year alone, he's got 2 records that have come out. Well, one's about to come out. He released this live album called Live at Orangefield, which is really good. I talked about it in my recent finds. But just to show you what I'm talking about. So this is between 2016 and 2024. All right. those are all the records that Van Morrison has put out in 8 years. This one, latest record project, is a double. A couple of these were doubles on vinyl. He puts out a lot of stuff, and he still does. Like I said, he's got another one coming out later this year, Duets. I've got it on pre-order. And it's just incredible to me that he's able to put that out. And that's one of the things that fascinates me about Van Morrison, is that, you know, is every record that he puts out quality? Is every record he puts out, Astral Weeks? Everybody's wanting to compare Van's output to, Moondance and Astral Weeks. Those are the two benchmarks of Van Morrison's career. Those are his Sgt. Pepper years. That's his, Exile on Main Street. That's his Odyssey and Oracle, his Pet Sounds. Everybody always wants to compare to the masterpiece of what the critics consider a masterpiece. Well, Van, gets a lot of flack from the critics because, just casual fans say, oh, Van just sounded the same, from the 80s up until now. Like, his stuff is just boring. He got too religious. Now he's too political. There's a lot of factors in Van's. He's up, like, in terms of, criticism, he's up there with, Neil Young, with Bob Dylan, and, he's known to be kind of cantankerous. So it's just, if I hadn't been drawn to Van early on, I think I still would have jumped into his catalog, because the melodies are warm. His music a lot of it sounds like this time of year. It sounds like the, end of summer, fall, autumn for you out of the U.S. It's got that, warmth to it. It's got that feel where, the songs are new, but you feel like you've heard the songs your whole life, kind of thing. I mean, you take a song like Into the Mystic. That song doesn't sound like something from, the 1970s. That doesn't sound like something from the 50s. It doesn't sound like something from the 2000s. It sounds like Van Morrison, and it sounds fresh. It's still haunting. It's still beautiful. It still makes you ponder what he's singing about. And he's got so many lyrics and, so many different songs that just match Into the Mystic. Into the Mystic is often the one that people put, at the top of their favorite list. I think it's my friend, it's up there for my friend Randall Nelson, who's a big Van Morrison fan. I know it's up there for my friend Glenn Kellaway, who's a big Van Morrison fan. But he has dozens and dozens and dozens of songs that equal Into the Mystic and beauty. They just came out, after his, supposed peak. And that's what I find fascinating, is that on all of these albums that have come out, there's gold on all of them, with one exception, which I'll talk about here just for a second. I won't harp on it. So anyway, all to say, this album, 2016, he releases a single called "It's Too Late." Actually, let me back that up. He actually puts out this album, which I've still not opened. This was a duets album that my mom had by Van Morrison. You have Bobby Womack, Mavis Staples, George Benson, Gregory Porter, Natalie Cole, Georgie Fame, Taj Mahal, Michael Bublé, Mark Knopfler, Steve Winwood, Shayna Morrison, his daughter. But he released the single from this called "Real Real Gone," which is an older Van Morrison song from his album A Sense of Wonder, I believe. And I heard that song and I thought, wow, that is just a fantastic tune. Michael Bublé did it great. It's jazzy. It's got a great horn section. It's upbeat. And I said, I forgot that I liked Van Morrison. So that was, sorry, what year was that? That was 2015. So again, the man puts out, feels like an album a year, oftentimes 2 albums a year. So then he releases this album called Keep Me Singing. And he released the song on here as a single called "Too Late." And it's kind of a similar feel to "Real Real Gone." And I love that song. It sounded so good. It sounded, again, upbeat. It's got that horn section to it. Most of this album is very low key. And I remember listening to it the first few times and was disappointed. I'm like, none of these songs sound like the song Too Late. None of them have that Van Morrison pep to them. They don't have that feel. I mean, they're all contemplative. Like, Let It Rhyme, Every Time I See a River, Keep Me Singing, Out in the Cold Again. Just, that's 4 songs, 5 songs, Memory Lane, are all just kind of slower ballads. And then he kind of does like a bluesy kind of song. The pen is mightier than the sword. Holy Guardian Angel. This is one of those records that sounds like fall, and this has since become a favorite of mine in Van Morrison's catalog because it sounds like something that I can put on when it's a gray, afternoon outside, and listen to these lyrics. It's very contemplative, and Van sounds great. Again, 2016, this probably passed a lot of people by. It's really, really, really good. And again, so I'm just showing you, this came out the following year, Roll with the Punches. It's a lot of blues covers and some Van Morrison originals that he's kind of reimagined, came out. And then there was this album, Versatile. And then he also, so he put out Versatile, which is kind of a standards album, but it's got some Van Morrison songs redone as like big band tunes, which I really like. He does a great version of A Foggy Day, Bye Bye Blackbird, Making Whoopee, let's see, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, They Can't Take That Away From Me. But he's also doing songs of his. Broken Record, the title track, the opening track is fantastic. He does Start All Over Again, which is a tune that's been in Van Morrison's catalog for a while. Just really, really good. And he also put out, this was kind of a jazzy kind of album called You're Driving Me Crazy with Joey DeFrancesco, who has since passed away. This came out in 2018. So again, 2016, the duets album was 2015, 2016, 2017 for Roll with the Punches, 2017 for Versatile, and then he puts out You're Driving Me Crazy in 2017. Just pumps out records. So when those 2 albums came out, You're Driving Me Crazy and Versatile, these 2, Van was playing live in the States, which is not something that Van Morrison does a lot. And he announced that he was coming, again, this was 2018, he announced that he was coming to Bristow, Virginia, which is just south of Washington, D.C., and he's been on my bucket list, and he's on my mom's bucket list. And so we bought tickets. We were like, we've got to go see Van Morrison. And we just couldn't believe we were going to go see Van Morrison. Like, this is insane. So we have the tickets. It's in September of 2018. And around that time, he was my step grandfather, but I only knew him as my grandfather, was battling end of life cancer. And he, was, in his final days and eventually passed away. He passed away about 4 days or so before the concert. And I remember being, just completely torn because the concert was going to fall the day of his viewing, of the family going and, greeting guests at the funeral home. And I remember just being absolutely torn. My mom was torn. We didn't know what to do. We were, about at that point that we were just going to, essentially, throw the tickets out, try to resell them, to go to his viewing, because I was a pallbearer for his funeral. And I remember being just, sad on so many different levels, obviously with his passing, with the concert, not happening, but also realizing, that my family is going to come first in this. Well, I didn't realize that my dad had talked to his mom, my grandma, and she essentially said to me to go to the concert because he was a fun-loving, guy. His laugh was infectious, and um, that he would want to have a good time. And then that, I could be with the family at the funeral, honoring him by carrying the casket. I'm sorry that this has, taken this turn, but I associate that era of Van Morrison with this time, and Anyway, so mom and I both got in the car, drove the 3.5 hours up to DC, went to go see Van Morrison. I know he opened with the Astral Weeks tune, the way young lovers do, and then he went into Sweet Thing, which was awesome. If you've never heard Astral Weeks by Van Morrison, do yourself a favor and listen to it, please. And I remember just thoroughly enjoying the show. Taj Mahal opened for Van. I had a friend who was there, got to see him. Van did stuff like Precious Time from Still on Top. He did Broken Record from Versatile. He did Have I Told You Lately in kind of a jazzy style. He did Moondance. He did Brown Eyed Girl. He closed with Gloria. And, he's walking off stage. And, this has been this has been the this has been the way that Van Morrison has left the stage for years, where they say, Van Morrison, and he walks off stage, and he's still singing, and it was just, awesome to see. But I just, that was just such a huge moment for me to see Van, to go back home the next day and do that for my grandfather. Was my papa is what I called him. Was very special. But yeah, so I mean, just a couple quick things. I obviously, one of my favorite live performances of all time is Caravan from The Last Waltz. Van Morrison just destroys it with the band. It's fantastic. It blows the Moondance version out of the water. Check that out if you've never heard it. I've In recent years, Tupelo Honey has risen in my ranks in the Van Morrison canon. Tupelo Honey is a fantastic song. Wild Night is on here. I Want to Rue You, Moonshine Whiskey. It's just fantastic. It's so good. His lyrics are so good, so poetic. He pulls in so many different so many different styles: folk, jazz, blues, rock, country, gospel. He's just so good. He just takes in music and soaks it in, and it's really just an awesome thing to see on the record when you listen to it. He put out this a few years ago, The Healing Game. This is the deluxe version from 1997. This was put out in 2019. It has the original album, The Healing Game, with some bonus cuts, and then he has like a live session with John Lee Hooker, and Carl Perkins is on here. Just, so like I'm a Van completist. I've got to get everything. This is my favorite Van Morrison album of the 80s. This is Beautiful Vision. Beautiful record. You really need to check it out. Beautiful Vision is on here, the title track. Cleaning Windows is on here. Dweller on the Threshold. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. So check out Beautiful Vision. And, Van is just one of those guys I will constantly buy his stuff until he's gone, and I'm sure he's got tons of archival stuff. Again, he did put out a stinker record, which I failed to mention, called I'll Save You the Trouble. What's It Gonna Take? Don't buy that record. Unless you are somebody that, agrees with Van's politics and wants to hear about it. Over 15 songs. Not a single song that doesn't talk about it. I think it's an absolute piece of garbage, but why elaborate on that? But anyway, I'll not go into that, because again, Van Morrison is just he's a top artist for me. That's the one album in his collection that I throw out. Everything else has moments of gold on it. Some albums are average, some are on the meh side, but there's a lot that are just fantastic. And I recommend most of the records that I'll show tonight if you want to start listening to Van. But oh yeah, and I guess one more thing in terms of my mom. One of the things that was on her Grail list was his 1991 album, "Hymns to the Silence." And I remember she was saying, you can't find it anywhere. It's nowhere to be found. It was out of print. And I remember just having a stroke of luck one day on eBay, found 2 copies of it on CD, and snagged one for her and one for me. And that was just one of my favorite gifts that I've given. It was just middle of the year, no reason other than for her to have Hymns to the Silence. It's a 2-record set. It's fantastic. Check that one out too. Not Feeling It Anymore, By His Grace, Professional Jealousy. I Can't Stop Loving You is on here. Why Must I Always Explain? It's fantastic. Van Morrison, he's just one of the best. I love him to death. I'll stop rambling. I'm glad to do this episode of the series. Y'all in the comments, let me know what you think about Van. Let me know your thoughts. And I look forward to talking to y'all in the comments. So, in the meantime, y'all be good. Take care. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye now.